أهلا بيكم في برنامج الذكاء العاطفي من مصر. أنا رانيا عبد الغفار، مدربة ومقيمة لمهارات الذكاء العاطفي اللي بتعلمنا إزاي ندرك ونفهم مشاعرنا وعواطفنا ونحسن إدارتها بالصورة اللي تخلينا نوصل لأحسن النتائج، ونفهم وندرك عواطف الآخرين ونتعامل معاها بأحسن صورة ولأحسن النتائج. بحب أرحب بيكم وأرحب بضيفتي الأولى لأول حلقة في البرنامج، كيسي كونراد. Hello كيسي.
Hello, Rania. Lovely to
كيسي
see you.
كيسي هي أول ضيفة ليا، لأن في الحقيقة هي اللي قامت معايا وساعدتني بأن البرنامج ده يظهر للحقيقة ويظهر للحياة ويظهر لكم. مشيت معايا في كل خطوة، وبالتالي أنا حابة أن أنا أستضيفها كأول ضيفة ليا في أول حلقة. و اسمحوا لي ان احنا نخلي البرنامج المرة دي باللغة الإنجليزية علشان نقدر نستفيد على قد ما نقدر من وجود كيسي معانا. Hello Casey.
Hello, Rania.
I'm going to say all those things again in English. Uh,
Okay.
Hello everybody in our program of Emotional Intelligence from Egypt. I'm Rania Abdel Ghaffar, an assessor and trainer coach of emotional intelligence skills and competencies, the ones that teach us how to be aware of, understand our emotions, and use them in the best way possible for the best results, and to understand and be aware of other people's feelings and emotions in order to deal with them in the best way possible for the best results. I'm very glad I'm here with Casey Conrad, and I would like to tell you a little bit about Casey. Casey is a well-being specialist and a whole life coach, a speaker and founder of Surviving Womanhood, a bold and empowering movement for women over 40. With decades of experience in coaching, holistic healing, and women's leadership, Casey helps women stop shrinking, overcome self-doubt, and step into their full power. She's also the host of the Women's Wisdom Wednesdays podcast and the creator of transformational workshops like Fearless and Unstoppable and Unmasking Self-Doubt. Casey brings a fierce commitment to truth, healing, and purpose. And without further ado, I would like to jump into the conversation with Casey so that I can make the best use of you being with us, Casey.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited to be here. I'm
I'm
so
so
excited.
excited also, and I'm very grateful. I just told everybody in Arabic that you are my first guest because you're actually the one who helped me set up this whole podcast thing, from the very idea of it to all the technicalities to me right now introducing the program and having my first episode of my
Well,
podcast.
it is truly a pleasure for me and an honor. So thank you so much. And Rania, you've been a guest on our podcast, on the Women's Wisdom Wednesdays podcast, several times, and hopefully several more. And each episode is more interesting than the last. So I am ready to dive in and see how successful your podcast is going to be, because you have so much to offer.
Thank you, Casey. It's been always a pleasure and an honor to be on your program, and a pleasure and honor to have you on mine. Well, let's dig into emotional intelligence. And I
Let's
would
do.
like, yeah, and I would like you to tell us a bit of how you see emotional intelligence in your field. I would like you to describe it from your perspective as a healer, a trainer, a well-being coach, and how it affects you in your job and how it would affect other practitioners while they're doing their job.
Whew, okay.
just a little intro, and then we're going to dig
Yeah.
into the specialized competencies, you know?
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So, emotional intelligence is something that is utmost in the front of my mind when I am working with clients. We have lost some sort of sense of the teaching and the importance of emotional intelligence at the basic level of the children, right? Like if children are taught emotional intelligence, maybe we wouldn't have any coaching jobs because
That's a point
people,
of view.
right? People would be able to sort out their emotions and their issues using these best practices that we teach or guide people through. Emotional intelligence is so important for people to be able to identify their emotions and for people to be able to sort out the differences between similar emotions like frustration and anger and things like that, guilt. Sometimes those kinds of emotions get sort of twisted up inside of a person because they haven't had any information on how to identify these things differently or how they feel differently to each of us, right? Each
Yeah.
emotion has its own kind of feeling. And unless you are aware of that, they all kind of feel the same. They don't feel good. And
Exactly.
so,
Either you're upset or you're happy, but you don't really
exactly.
know the
That's right.
difference of upset because, happy because, in what way. Exactly.
Yes. Yes. So we either feel good or we feel bad. There's no in between for most people.
So
And
true.
so one of my targets when I start to work with people is to guide them into understanding that there are levels of emotions that we all pass through many times during the day and that that's okay, right? Because I've had people come in and they're like, I'm angry all the time. So they feel like they literally have been told, and this is true for some people, but not all. They have anger issues when actually they just are not aware of when they're feeling guilty and the difference between when they're angry about something. And so to be able to help people to point those out makes a huge difference. The same with the what we call positive emotions, right? Everything is not bliss and it doesn't have to be. We don't have to feel those strong emotions all the time. We're not meant to. Being in the middle somewhere here, content in a balanced state, is wonderful because it's where our bodies are in, I'm going to say homeostasis, but that's just perfect balance for where we need to be. So that's my like 2 cents.
Beautiful. Actually, you took us right onto the competencies ladder. But I want to stop here with the anger issues because I have a little to say about it. I have found that, especially with anger, especially with people who become angry quickly, who are inflammable, I would call them inflammable, it's usually the inability to express how they feel when they need to express them, you know
Yes,
they yeah,
agreed.
because they have this inability that makes them fail to get things out regularly and in good time so that things don't build up to explode. This is one thing. And the second thing is because they have not learned, they haven't gone through the emotional literacy development where they develop how to express emotions, because how you express emotions takes the emotion to its slot. So if I
Mhm.
say I'm worried, it takes me to the worry side where I need to problem solve that. I have a worry. I should look at the input, see how things are, the variables of the situation. How can I calm myself down? If I'm jealous, that's something else. If I'm hurt, that's a third thing. And each one has its slot and each one has its way of dealing. So when we
Mhm.
don't do that and everything goes untitled, it goes onto the basic anger emotion.
Right. Yes. And
Everything wrong before are not used.
right. And piggybacking onto that, the fire, and to me, I liken it as you are stoking a volcano, and that is going to eventually erupt and spew all over everyone around you.
Exactly. That idea of spilling all over everybody without differentiation, without the elimination of people who had nothing to do with it, or the people that you actually care to have close to you.
Yes.
So everybody gets hurt. And those who have some sense,
Including you, including the
of
person
course,
themselves,
yes, of course.
especially, right?
But I mean, those whom one would need to
Mm-hmm.
calm one down, and to be there
Yes.
for you, and to, so that you can go cuddle in their arms and, tell them, please take me in and calm me down because I don't know what to do. Well, they got burnt.
Exactly. Yes. And so now
They're
they're
ashes.
like,
They need somebody to calm them down now. So,
yes.
emotional understanding, awareness, understanding, analyzing, expression is incredibly important before doing
Hmm.
anything else. It prevents fire, it prevents explosion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So, this, I think, like this, we have covered the first competency, which is very important. Let's move
Yes.
on to the next one, like recognizing patterns of behavior, for example.
Right. Hmm.
How would you describe the importance of that?
Well, one of the things that I like to do with people, and it's very important, and we do this early on in the coaching process, is we go through and identify patterns that have been moving through someone's life, like emotional behavioral loops, let's call them, that keep people kind of stuck, right? Sort of like people pleasing, perfectionism, avoidance. And when we can recognize these sorts of patterns, we can then begin to break them down and kind of change them, actually. So because like most of us are reacting to the old stories, right? Stories we tell each other over and over and over. And so, and we're doing this without even realizing it. So in the coaching piece of this, we kind of slow down the role, as it were, and identify and point out these patterns and help people to have an understanding and a recognition. So once they see the pattern happening, they can stop, which we're moving on to another competency, but they can kind of stop and regroup. And then it's breaking of those patterns that allows someone some growth and moving forward in their life.
Well, if I'm going to ask a question now, is how would you differentiate between recognizing patterns and using that instead of going by autopilot versus reinventing the wheel every single time and not resorting to patterns that we already know, because
Mm-hmm.
when we do the same thing, it's because we are using assumptions based on old stories, like you said.
Right.
But if I don't do that, and this is very tricky, actually, I would like to really understand. If I
Mm-hmm.
don't build on past assumptions, I'm going to reinvent the wheel every time. So, how do you see any solution for this? Is it right
Well,
to always be aware of everything, like I'm reinventing the wheel every time?
well, I think that it's not so much that as being aware. It's bringing awareness because we do these things and we learn these behaviors through conditioning. We're not even aware that it's happening.
Yes.
It's like we have these the ways that we move through the world, the relationships that we have. Let's just take people pleasing for an example. So if it's my job to make sure every single person around me is happy, no matter how I feel about it, that is going to become a habit for me. And because I'm feeling good about that, either because they're not getting angry with me, or they're praising me, thanking me, looking at me like the savior, if you would. And so this is how I start to identify myself as the whatever it is, the savior or the peacekeeper, or whatever in my mind is the label for my people pleasing.
Mm.
And so what happens then, I'm doing this people pleasing, but somewhere in the back of my mind there's a voice that says, what are you doing for yourself? Right? And how come all these people are taking you for granted? Why are they taking advantage of me? And that then becomes a vicious cycle.
Mm.
So what I do in my coaching is I work to have people identify, just pick one person. Because normally when we build up these kinds of resentments and angers, it's normally because one person is triggering that feeling, even though it might be much broader, but we focus on that one person. So I work to identify who is that person who is triggering these emotions in you.
And who
And
has
then,
replicas in other people, who I
yes,
always
exactly.
remember through other people, who I always get in touch through other people.
Yes, yes. And then to break that down, like what, you know what I mean? So then they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They just need to be aware and be able to identify when that's happening, because it's through feeling, isn't it?
Yes.
When you start to feel that same feeling building in you, you can recognize this is a trigger for that emotion. And then the habit begins, right? The behavior just follows. So when you start to be able to identify the feeling of that emotion, you can say, okay, stop, take a breath, and now you have a choice, right? So you're open to choice. I can choose to continue this behavior I've done all along, or I can tweak that behavior. And my guidance is always the same: baby steps. Tweak your behavior just slightly at the beginning until you create that new behavior. And then you can go a little further, because when we try to take these giant steps, that doesn't work. So we always revert back because it's too much out of our comfort zone, and that huge giant change doesn't fit us.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm gonna I'm gonna skip the next couple of competencies and move on to something I think you would be best to talk about: empathy
Okay.
and the balance
Okay.
between empathizing with other people and how it affects us, and empathizing with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Having this balance of being there for them and understanding them, and the deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, how I apply this competency of empathy in my coaching practice is to create a space where clients can feel seen, heard, and to feel safe. So I teach them to extend, first and foremost, empathy to themselves. Understand how you feel and how these feelings are affecting you, most importantly. And then, especially for those people who are feeling some kind of shame or sort of, self judgment, like people do. And then I look at empathy like a bridge. Like, you show empathy to yourself, like it's a bridge between you being angry with yourself, all this negative self talk, to something more understanding, something more. And I want to use compassion here, not to confuse the two, because empathy and compassion are not the same. But when we can feel empathy toward ourselves, now we can afford to be compassionate also with ourselves. And then when we understand that, we can then show empathy, build that bridge between us and others. And then it helps us to soften that inner critic, right? That inner voice that says all these, you suck kind of thing, right? And
Judgment,
then,
criticizing.
yes.
Yeah,
Exactly. And then it allows us to be able to feel those things and extend that empathetic piece to those around us as well.
of course. It really builds tolerance, doesn't it? And that's what
Yes.
we all need right now. So, Casey, I would like to ask you about the importance of optimism as a competency.
Ah.
What do you think optimism is as important to the client as it is to the coach?
I believe that I think that optimism is something that's very important. I'm a very optimistic person. so so I'm very much in favor of optimism. I
Yeah.
think I don't look at it like blind positivity necessarily, right? But more like a grounded belief that change is possible,
Mhm.
right? I believe that change is nearly always possible. And if you model and, like nurture a mindset of resilience and encouragement with your clients, and which allows them then to see possibilities instead of limitations, right? Does that make sense? So I think also like optimism is radical for some women who've been told they need to settle, that they need to just stay in their place, or, they, again, we have these ideas of who we are, right? And so for those people who are kind of stuck, and we use that word kind of stuck a lot, maybe stagnant is another way. So not necessarily have to be there always, but moving at a much slower pace than they would like to. And so what I do with clients in this realm is to kind of help them rewrite their script. Yeah. So for example, if your day, just one day, could go exactly as you would like it to go without any limitations, how would that day go?
Yeah,
Right.
that's
So
a
to
beautiful thing to consider.
mhm. So it gives them that thought process, because most women, most people in general, don't give themselves permission to believe that their day could go exactly the way that they would choose, because they have all these other things on them that they must do,
Mm.
right? Without understanding that's your choice, right? That's your choice.
Right. And what about people who usually say, um, I'm this character? Um, I mean, they want to stay as they are. They don't want to change. They feel, how would you have optimism as a coach in dealing with them? The ones that are that they feel secure being who they are, and they believe that any sort of change would take away that sense of safety and security.
Actually, I would think that someone who is already happy with the way they were, happy in their unhappiness or comfortable in their discomfort, wouldn't call me.
Oh, yes, that's very good point. Yeah, yeah. So how do you say that to them while I mean without putting it right into their onto their face?
Yeah.
How would you do that? You would
Well, and I'm gonna I'm going to use an example of a client that I
Yeah.
had. Okay, so I had this client, and we'll just call her Fatma. She doesn't, it's a fictitious name.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay, so Fatma came to me, and her relationship, her career, she wasn't happy with any parts of her life, right? She wasn't making enough money. And when we started going through, because coaching is just a series of kind of, right, going through the competencies and applying other tools that we have to that.
Yeah.
And so we started going through that, and she had so much resistance to taking any responsibility for her situation in any of the parts of her life. It was her partner's fault that her relationship wasn't what she wanted. It was her boss and her colleagues' fault that her work wasn't, she wasn't happy at work. It was because people didn't value her, didn't see her value, didn't understand how important she was to the organization, and they should be paying her more money, yada yada, on and on. And I listened to her talk, and I would ask her questions, specific questions, as we do, and say, so what exactly is your partner doing that is causing your relationship to be less than you would like, right? So, and then she would just, she would rattle off all these things she didn't like about her partner. And so I asked her a very pointed question, and I said, it sounds like this is not the person for you. What makes you want to work at it? What is there in that relationship that is worth saving for you? Ah,
Mm.
because, and so having that put on you, like, oh my gosh, because I said maybe you'd be better off just leaving the relationship, right? Because it seems like you're so unhappy and that you don't like your partner at all. Yeah. And then she was like, oh, no, 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 no. I love him. I love him. Oh, tell me some things you love about him. You
Mm.
see? So then when she started naming some of those things that she loved about her partner, everything about her changed. Her body language changed. It's softened, so we get them in this softened
That's
space.
warmer.
Yes, exactly. And so, and then we went through that with all of the different areas of her life. And then she kind of realized it was more about her perception, and that maybe she wasn't doing everything she could do as well, right? She wasn't contributing to making any of those things better.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Well, that's brilliant. Um, Before we say goodbye, I would like to ask you for a bit of advice that you would give other therapists, healers, coaches on how to integrate the competencies of emotional intelligence, or how important it is to integrate those competencies in their work.
Okay. First, I would like to say, as a coach, therapist, or healer, it's very important for you yourself to have a deep understanding of what these competencies are and how you're applying them in your own life. So, to have a deep understanding of how you can, as a coach, healer, or therapist, apply them in your work. So you can start to recognize which one is needed, because you don't always have to start with number one and go through number eight,
Yeah.
right? And then the next thing that I would say is, for everybody, anybody listening, whether you use this in your work or not, it's important to apply it in your everyday life. Start small. Pick out one competency and work on that until you have a deep understanding, and you notice you're practicing it in your daily life, and practice it with your children. When children can be taught emotional intelligence, their lives become so much better, fuller, richer, so much less dramatic. And actually it helps children deal with trauma a lot better too, because they have a better understanding of their own feelings. And so I think those are kind of the things that I would say. And again, most people practice bits of these competencies every single day. They may not understand that's exactly what they're doing, but they are, because we all have, because we live in a society with other people around us. So, and most people, and this is very important to hear, most people practice emotional intelligence outside of their family circle, outside of their friend circle, like at work, or if you have a group of friends that you spend time with, you are more likely to practice these emotional intelligence competencies or emotional intelligence, period, with people outside of your closest circle. And this, I think, is something that I would like to see changed. I would love for people to start paying attention to how they're treating the people closest to them, because that is your support group. And and Ronnie and I had a bit of a discussion about this earlier, but when we feel comfortable with people, when we feel loved by people, we feel like we can just blow up and spew all over them and they're just going to take it. And I'm here to tell you, from almost 40 years of doing this kind of work, that's not always true. People, there are times when people will just say, I've had enough.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to be very mindful of, first, how are we treating those closest to us? And how are we treating ourselves? How empathetic are we being to ourselves? How much are we listening to our own needs, our own wants, our own desires? Because oftentimes that's where resentment comes from, that we feel like we are not being given what we are giving away. And that, I'm here to tell you, that starts with you. So I think that that probably covers it pretty well. Um, I really appreciate this conversation. It's such an important thing for people to understand.
I'm very grateful to have had you for this less than an hour episode. It would have been great to continue it for much longer. And but this is not the end of it, huh? We're gonna have other episodes, inshallah, as we go.
Absolutely, absolutely,
And
because that this is just too important to,
yeah,
let go.
it is a part of life that usually people are unaware of, but use it all the time. So when you use
Yes,
something you're unaware of, you don't use it to the best results, and to the best you can. So,
exactly.
well, we're here to change that, inshallah. Thank you so much,
Inshallah.
Tracy, for being with us, and to other episodes. Until then, a big hug, kisses, and a big thank you. For
Thank you. And let me say shukran jazilan for
oh,
everybody.
Allah,
And I really appreciate being here. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon.
inshallah, definitely.
Okay.
You take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.